John stood in a park on the edge of the city, clutching a worn-out resume, his heart heavy with frustration and despair. Once a promising engineer, he now faced the harsh reality of unemployment after his company went bankrupt due to the economic downturn. Every day, John tirelessly sent out resumes and attended interviews, but good news never came. Despite this, he continued to set out early each morning, determined to find a job to support himself and his 5-year-old son, Ethan. John's wife, Mary, had passed away a year ago from illness, a devastating blow to him. Her death not only took away the person he loved most, but also left him solely responsible for raising Ethan. Ethan was a smart and lively child, but since his mother's death, he had become more quiet and withdrawn. Each morning, John carefully sent Ethan off to school before starting his daily job hunt. On this particular day, John attended yet another interview, but once again, the outcome was disappointing. The interviewer politely told him that there were no suitable positions available. As John walked out of the office, he felt a heavy weight in his heart. He knew he needed to find a job soon, or he wouldn't be able to pay next month's rent and living expenses. Back home, John saw Ethan sitting at the dining table, drawing with a pencil. On the table were a glass of milk and a few slices of bread, their dinner for the night. Ethan looked up and smiled faintly when he saw his father, though there was still a hint of worry in his eyes. "How did it go today, Dad?" Ethan asked, his voice tinged with hope. John forced a smile. "It was okay, Ethan. I'll find a job soon. Don't worry." After dinner, John sat by the window, looking out at the city streets. As night fell and the streetlights came on, his heart remained heavy. To make ends meet, John had taken on several low-paying part-time jobs. He worked at a fast food restaurant and did night shifts at a small grocery store. The constant work left him exhausted, but he had to keep going for Ethan's sake. Ethan faced his own challenges at school. Due to their financial struggles, he wore old clothes and carried a worn-out backpack. Other kids often teased him, and sometimes they would even bully him. Despite this, Ethan never complained, understanding that his father was doing his best. One day, Ethan brought home a drawing he had made at school. It depicted a tall building with a big smiling face on top, surrounded by blue skies and white clouds. He handed the drawing to John and said, "Dad, this is a happy building. We'll live in a place like this one day, right?" John took the drawing, feeling a surge of warmth in his heart. He patted Ethan's head and said firmly, "Yes, we will." As the night grew late, Ethan soon fell asleep. John sat at the table, the soft light casting a warm glow over the papers in front of him. He began writing yet another batch of cover letters. Despite the difficult road ahead, he knew he couldn't give up. For Ethan's sake, he had to keep going, because he believed that happiness was waiting for them, just around the corner. On a Saturday morning, sunlight streamed through the gaps in the curtains of the small rented apartment. John woke up early and prepared breakfast for Ethan before heading out to continue his job search. As he walked through the bustling streets, he contemplated his next steps. Just as he passed by a cafe, he suddenly heard someone call his name. "John? Is that you?" Turning around, John saw a familiar face. It was his college friend, Mark. They had lost touch after graduation, and this unexpected reunion brought a wave of excitement. "Mark, long time no see," John responded enthusiastically. The two friends walked into the cafe and found a quiet corner to sit down. Mark ordered 2 coffees and asked with concern, "John, how have you been lately?" John gave a wry smile and briefly recounted his recent struggles. Mark listened, his brows furrowed in empathy, but soon a smile appeared on his face. "Old friend, I'm currently working at a well-known tech company. We're having a job fair next week. You should definitely give it a try." Hope sparked in John's eyes. "Really? Can you tell me more about it?" Mark detailed the company and the upcoming job fair, encouraging John to attend. "I know you have great skills and determination. This company values those qualities highly." A week later, John arrived at the job fair early, feeling both nervous and excited. The hall was crowded with people, and various booths displayed an array of tech company brochures and exhibits. John, clutching his resume, visited each booth, striving to showcase his strengths and abilities. When he reached the booth of a large tech company, a tall, well-dressed middle-aged man caught his attention. The man, whose sharp eyes and wise demeanor stood out, was engaged in conversation with other job seekers. Summoning his courage, John stepped forward, introduced himself, and briefly outlined his background and skills. The tall man, named Robert, was a senior executive at the company. He listened attentively to John's story, occasionally nodding. John spoke about his university studies, work experience, and how he kept his skills updated through self-study during his unemployment. "Thank you for sharing, John," Robert said. "I'm impressed by your perseverance and technical abilities. Our company values these qualities highly. We're starting a 3-month training program designed to develop and enhance new employees' skills. Would you be interested in participating?" John's eyes lit up, and he eagerly responded, "Absolutely. I would love to participate." Robert smiled and handed John a business card along with detailed information about the training program. "Great. Prepare yourself. The training begins in 2 weeks. I look forward to seeing you at the company." John took the card and documents, expressing his gratitude. "Thank you, Robert. This is a tremendous opportunity for me and my son." On the way home, John felt a surge of excitement, as if a light of hope had finally broken through the clouds. Back at home, he couldn't wait to share the good news with Ethan. "Dad, I knew you could do it," Ethan exclaimed, jumping up and hugging John tightly. John patted Ethan's head, feeling the warmth and hope he had longed for. He knew the road ahead would still be challenging, but this time, he wasn't alone. He had a goal, motivation, and a renewed sense of courage to start again. In the days that followed, John prepared diligently for the upcoming training. He reviewed many technical subjects and adjusted his life and work schedule as best as he could. He believed that with enough effort and persistence, he would pass the training and step into a new life. This chance encounter, like a ray of light, illuminated the future for John and Ethan. Their lives were about to take a significant turn for the better. John sat at his desk, carefully reading through the detailed training program materials. The training would take place at the company's headquarters and last for 3 months. The full-time schedule meant he wouldn't be able to continue his part-time jobs. Facing 3 months without any income would put tremendous financial pressure on him and Ethan. His heart was filled with conflicting emotions and inner struggle. Late at night, Ethan was already sound asleep. John gazed at his son's peaceful face, silently making a decision. This training program was their chance to change their fate, and he couldn't let it slip away. For Ethan's sake, he had to seize this opportunity, despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. The next morning, John decided to talk to his landlord about delaying the rent payment. Mrs. Thompson, a strict but kind-hearted woman in her 60s, listened as John explained his situation and request. "Mrs. Thompson, I know it's my responsibility to pay rent on time, but I'm facing a crucial opportunity right now. If possible, I'd like to delay the rent payment for the next 3 months. I promise, once I find a job, I'll pay back everything I owe." Mrs. Thompson was silent for a moment, her eyes moving between John's determined expression and the training materials he held. Finally, she sighed and said, "John, I know you're a good man and a good father. I can agree to this, but you must pay all the back rent as soon as you start working." John gratefully shook Mrs. Thompson's hand. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. You're very kind. I won't let you down." With the rent issue resolved, John turned his attention to their daily living expenses. He thought of Mark, the old friend who had introduced him to the job fair. Though uneasy, John knew he had to rely on his friend's help. "Mark, I need to ask you a favor," John said over the phone. "I've decided to join the training program, but it means I'll have no income for 3 months. Could I borrow some money to get by?" Mark was silent for a moment on the other end of the line, then replied, "John, you know we're old friends. There's no need to be so formal. I'm glad you're taking this opportunity. I'll help you as much as I can. When can we meet to talk?" They met at a cafe, where Mark handed John an envelope containing the cash he needed. "It's not a lot, but I hope it helps you through this tough time. Remember, we all believe you'll succeed." John accepted the envelope with tears in his eyes. "Thank you, Mark. This means so much to me and Ethan." With everything arranged, John threw himself into preparing for the upcoming training. To ensure Ethan's well-being during this time, he entrusted him to their neighbor Alice, a kind-hearted single mother. Alice agreed to help look after Ethan, allowing John to focus on his studies. On the first day of training, John walked into the company's training center, greeted by a sea of unfamiliar faces and stacks of heavy textbooks. Taking a deep breath, he silently encouraged himself. "This is for Ethan, for our future." The training program was intense and demanding. John left early every morning and returned late every night, diligently absorbing new knowledge. He constantly reminded himself that this was not just a job, but their only chance to escape their difficult situation. Despite the exhaustion, thoughts of Ethan gave him the strength to persevere. During the training, John met several like-minded peers who, like him, were facing various personal challenges. They supported and encouraged each other, tackling one obstacle after another together. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling session, John walked out of the company building, bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. He knew the road ahead would still be filled with difficulties, but he felt ready. He believed that with persistence, success would eventually come. Returning home, John found Ethan already asleep under Alice's care. He quietly approached his son's bed, watching his peaceful slumber, feeling a surge of strength and determination. He knew that for this little life, he had to keep going, no matter how tough the journey ahead might be. By the second week of the training program, John had gradually adapted to the high-intensity courses and rigorous learning schedule. Every morning, he left the house before Ethan woke up, and he didn't return home until after Ethan was already asleep. Despite his busy schedule, John made time each day to leave a small note for his son, filled with words of encouragement and warm greetings, placing it on Ethan's bedside table. As the difficulty of the training increased, John felt the immense pressure mounting. He faced not only complex technical problems, but also fierce competition from other trainees. The company had set strict evaluation standards, and only the top-performing trainees would pass the final assessment and secure a permanent job. One day, John encountered a particularly challenging technical issue while coding a complex algorithm. No matter how he adjusted the code, the program refused to run correctly. He spent hours in the lab, repeatedly trying different solutions. But as the night wore on, he still hadn't found a resolution. Just as John was beginning to feel overwhelmed, a fellow trainee named Paul approached him. "John, need some help? You look a bit frustrated," Paul said kindly. With a sigh, John explained the problem in detail. Paul listened attentively and then offered some suggestions. Together, they spent several hours debugging the code, and finally their combined efforts paid off. The problem was solved. John shook Paul's hand gratefully. "Thank you, Paul. I really didn't know what to do." Paul smiled. "Don't mention it. We're all working towards the same goal. Helping each other out is the best way to succeed." Meanwhile, Ethan was also experiencing his own growth. Although he felt lonely due to his father's busy schedule, he gradually understood the hard work and sacrifices John was making. After a parent-teacher conference, Ethan's teacher asked to speak with him. "Ethan, your dad has been very busy lately, hasn't he?" the teacher asked gently. Ethan nodded, his eyes reflecting a newfound maturity. "Yes, teacher. Dad is in a very important training program. He says it's for our future." The teacher smiled and patted Ethan's head. "You're a very understanding child. Remember, your dad is working hard so you can have a better life." During this time, Ethan learned to take better care of himself. He began making simple breakfasts, diligently completing his homework after school, and occasionally helping their neighbor Alice with household chores. Every time John came home and saw how responsible Ethan had become, he felt both proud and heartbroken. As the training entered its final month, John faced the most significant challenge yet. The company organized a major project presentation where each trainee had to showcase their achievements during the training. John and his team chose a challenging project, developing a smart home system. This project tested their technical skills as well as their ability to collaborate and manage projects effectively. Throughout the project development, John leveraged his previous work experience and the new knowledge he had gained during the training. He and his team worked tirelessly, overcoming numerous technical hurdles. Despite the late nights and long hours, John remained motivated and determined. On the day of the presentation, John's team delivered an outstanding performance. Their smart home system impressed the evaluation committee, earning unanimous praise. Standing on the stage, John felt an overwhelming sense of pride and fulfillment as he looked at Robert and the other executives in the audience. He knew this success was not just his own, but a testament to the hard work and collaboration of his entire team. That evening, when John returned home, he found Ethan waiting for him in bed. "Dad, did your presentation go well today?" Ethan asked excitedly. John smiled and nodded, lifting his son into a hug. "Yes, Ethan, we did great." Ethan hugged his father's neck tightly and whispered, "Dad, you're the best. I knew you could do it." Those words filled John's heart with warmth and strength. He realized that as long as he had Ethan by his side, he would have the endless motivation to overcome any challenge. The training program finally came to an end. In the final assessment, John excelled, showcasing his outstanding performance during the training and the impressive results of his project presentation. He passed the assessment with flying colors and was offered a permanent position at the company. When John received the job offer, he was so excited that he nearly jumped for joy. He couldn't wait to get home and share the news with Ethan. "Ethan, we did it!" John exclaimed, lifting his son into a big hug, tears of joy shining in his eyes. "Dad, I knew you could do it," Ethan replied, hugging John tightly, his face beaming with happiness. With the start of his new job, John's income increased significantly, which meant their living conditions would greatly improve. They no longer had to worry about rent and living expenses every month. After paying off the overdue rent and debts, John decided to move to a more spacious and bright apartment to provide Ethan with a better environment to grow up in. On moving day, the sun was shining brightly as John and Ethan stood hand in hand at the entrance of their new apartment. It was a 3-bedroom unit with a large living room bathed in sunlight streaming through the big floor-to-ceiling windows, making the space warm and inviting. John and Ethan worked together to decorate their new home, hanging their favorite paintings and arranging the furniture, filling the house with warmth and love. After starting their new life, Ethan transferred to a new school. There, he made many new friends and became more cheerful and confident. Every day after school, Ethan played with his new friends, his face always lit up with a happy smile. One evening, John and Ethan sat on their balcony, gazing at the stars in the night sky. Ethan suddenly asked, "Dad, how do you think our life is now?" John smiled and replied, "Ethan, our life is great. We've faced many difficulties and challenges, but we've kept working hard and never gave up. Now, we've finally found our happiness." Ethan nodded, his eyes shining with wisdom. "Dad, I'm going to work hard to achieve my dreams too, just like you." John, deeply moved, hugged his son tightly. "Ethan, you are my greatest pride. No matter how tough the road ahead may be, we'll face it together because we are the strongest team." As the night grew deeper, Ethan fell asleep in John's arms. John gently placed him in bed, tucking him in and watching his son's peaceful face as he slept. His heart was filled with warmth and hope. He knew that no matter what challenges the future held, he and Ethan would face them together, welcoming each new day with strength and determination.